Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Balls fans. I'm your host, Bull. It's time for our Day 12 of Fall Camp news, notes, and thoughts. Day 12 of Fall Camp was our second and probably final scrimmage of Fall Camp, so that's what we'll be talking about today. And we do have some news and notes from the insiders. It's not a whole lot, so for the most part, I will be just kind of reading Coach Heupel's body language and his presser today, kind of dissecting through some of that coach speak, things like that. But as always, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, with the news and notes from the insiders, the bulk of it starts right here. Nico did not participate. Sounds like he had a stomach bug. Some people are saying, well, maybe Nico's actually injured and, the staff is trying to keep that from us. There's a very small possibility that that's true, just because our staff does keep things very close to the vest, especially with injuries. So I would say that there's a 95% chance that Nico is actually sick, and that there's not much more for us to be concerned with in regards to that. But I will also say that I was a little bit concerned before I even got that information, just in the way that Coach Heupel looked in his press conference. We've talked about this for, pretty much since we started this channel, that you can kind of read the way that Coach Heupel feels about either the practices or heading into a game week or coming out of a scrimmage by his body language. We talk a whole lot about whenever his hat's on backwards, that the energy's there and that things probably looked good in practice. And he also feels great about the upcoming game. Today, his energy was very, very low. So is it because, we don't know why. We can only speculate. I'll just say that. We can speculate a whole lot of different ways. Y'all let me know y'all's thoughts down in the comment section as to why you feel like, Coach Heupel's energy was pretty low in his presser today following our second scrimmage of fall camp. But we will say this also, it's kind of a good thing. Maybe it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because we got a better look at guys like Gaston Moore and Jake Merklinger. Sounds like they were very clean with the football. Not a whole lot of turnovers, if any turnovers from them. So I think that that's a good thing. We already know that Nico is going to be the starter, knock on wood, as long as he's healthy. But I'll also say this just to kind of go along with, that whole vibe, right, of players getting injured and all that. My biggest takeaway, big reason for us to be very excited as Volunteer fans, that we didn't have any major injuries as far as we know coming out of this scrimmage. That's huge, because I don't think that we're going to be scrimmaging too much more moving forward. I actually think that the staff is going to take a look at the film and all that. They probably had a pretty good idea of who they, wanted to start at most of the positions. But in some spots, they said, okay, we got to figure out who's going to be here. Maybe some guys are fighting for that one spot. There's plenty fighting for the second, third, and fourth string. So I feel like watching this film, obviously seeing the scrimmage live from a coaching perspective, they got a good idea. But then you watch the film and the eye in the sky don't lie. They'll know, I would say, coming up out of this one, moving forward, who the starters more than likely will be. And we'll kind of touch on that a little bit more as we go through this. But, we're kind of done with the whole quarterback thing. Just as far as what the insiders had to say, let's move on to the rest of it. Lance Hurd and Andre Carrick did participate. We'll talk a little bit more about them as we kind of get into Coach Heupel's thoughts. And please, y'all, bear with me, because I'm going to be going through my notes as we are going through this entire video. But it does sound like Deshaun Bishop and Peyton Lewis played very well today. That's got to be very encouraging for us as Tennessee fans. Dante Thornton sounds like he had the best day out of all the wide receivers. Squirrel White also played well, and so did Brew McCoy. So he did get to, go out there and participate. He's just a dog. You know what I'm saying? I know that the coaches probably said, man, look, we don't want you going out there. But he was able to convince them to let him go out there and get some reps. And I think that it's probably good. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but since he didn't aggravate his injury or anything like that, we would say, hey, that's very, very, very productive for this team. Now, it does kind of suck that Nico wasn't out there throwing to him, but it is good for his confidence, for his psyche, just to get out there and, have an opportunity to go in some live reps. We also know that Joshua Joseph, Jeremiah Thielander, and Arion Connor flashed a lot in today's scrimmage. I don't think that Ricky Gibson participated just as far as the secondary, but it does sound like Jalen McMurray and Jordan Matthews rotated a lot at the other cornerback position on the opposite side of Jamal McCoy. And as far as the star goes, Boo and Christian Harrison sound like they got even amount of time. Now, let's go ahead and get into Coach Heupel's thoughts. It sounds like he liked the operation of the entire team, right? And I think that he was probably speaking a little bit more about the offense. It sounds like it was a very clean scrimmage, not a whole lot of penalties, things like that. So that always makes you feel good, right? Especially whenever you have backups going. But I know that Coach Heupel, part of the reason that he had a lower, amount of energy, I think, was because Nico did not participate. And you want to have some coaching points for him because we know that he's going to be really, really good. At least we feel like he will be. I know that he's going to be very good. Some people might not be sold on that just yet, but he's going to be a stud whenever he gets his opportunities. But at the same time, as a coach, you want to get as many reps as you possibly can, as many teaching points as you can, especially for a quarterback starting, the entire season for the first time. So I think that that was a really big part of it. But, just moving on, he also talked about Lance Hurd and Andre Carrick playing really solid. Now, it does sound like Lance Hurd is going to have to get more into game shape, something that we've talked about. I feel like since spring, you kind of see, yeah, he's got all the skill sets, but we go up tempo. LSU didn't do that, which is where he transferred from. So that was one of my biggest questions. I think, though, just in kind of watching some of the, few amount of reps that we get to see of practice clips, I think that he looks like he is in pretty solid shape. He's going to have to continue to fight and come along in that regard as far as what the insiders are saying. Now, Andre Carrick, I believe that he did start at the left guard. Is it going to be him as the starter? Did he perform well? I think another part of the reason that Coach Heupel may have looked, I would say, a little bit down was maybe the offensive line didn't perform as well as he wanted them to in the second scrimmage. You would expect, especially getting back two starters or two potential starters, that they will perform a little bit better. Now, again, y'all, I'm speculating. I don't know for sure that they did or they didn't perform well, but we know that our defensive line is stacked. It's very, very deep. And I mean, they got the best of the offensive line in the previous scrimmage. They probably got the best of them in the second scrimmage as well. But my whole point is maybe they just, the offensive line, I'm saying, did not live up to the expectations of Coach Heupel. Again, that is pure speculation. So who's going to be the starter at left guard? Right now, maybe it's Andre Carrick. He's going to have to stay healthy. Was really happy to see Jackson Lampley getting some more reps this entire week, just because I think that he's a guy that you trust, right? Like, I think of offensive linemen as, primarily the players that you want to get into a bar fight with. You know what I'm saying? You got to be very, very tough. And being tough is playing through a little bit of, nicks and bruises, bumps and bruises, things like that. Haven't seen a whole lot of that from Andre Carrick. Seen a ton of it from Jackson Lampley. And, of course, we know that Chem Umarov could also play at that position. Now, moving forward, we also know that we did a good job just kind of setting up situational football, with the headsets and just kind of simulating, gameplay, things like that, game time situations. Now, we haven't talked a lot in a while about the headsets. Some people are saying that they don't think that we'll use them, but we've said, like, from the start of it, you have to use them just because, okay, we do like to go up tempo, which means that we're going to be signaling in plays, but you can still signal in those plays to get it to the rest of the team while also talking to Nico, who's going to be a first-year season starter for our Volunteers. And you can tell them, hey, look, this is what we're expecting on this play. This is what you need to be looking for. And hey, make sure this, make sure that. We also heard Coach Fulmer talking on the Sports Animal about the exact same thing. So I think that we will use it. And, it sounds like Coach Heupel is maybe starting to get more adjusted to it, but at the same time, he said so many different, on so many different occasions that he doesn't want to give too much information to the quarterback. He doesn't want to talk to him too much. So that could maybe hinder us from using it. That would be my only concern with it. But I think that we will use it. Also, just as far as the iPads, one of my biggest takeaways just in hearing, all the coaches talk about it throughout all of fall camp is that the coaches have to get adjusted to it and be able to execute it in a way that's really quick. Now, we know that high school has used it for such a long time, and I can at least say this, down here in Georgia, it's not just those iPads, it's also like a big TV screen. I don't know how legal that is. I would, imagine that if you can use an iPad, you should be able to use a monitor. I think that that would be a lot better because you can use that monitor to kind of like as a whiteboard. It's easier. It's a bigger surface. You can talk to the entire team and, you can set up a tent and all that just so that the opposing team and all that can't see it. But that would be my suggestion. If I could suggest to the staff anything, I would say try to, see if this is legal. That's what I would do just because that is the easiest way. I think that that's the best way to implement that technology on the sidelines, especially if they're kind of struggling with those iPads. So those are my thoughts with that. Now, moving on to the next point that I got in my notes, there is great competition amongst our kickers and our punters. Now, I think that a lot of that is coach speak. I think that they know who the kickoff guy is going to be, who the kicker is going to be, and who the punter is going to be. But they have to say, yes, it's still an open competition because fall camp's not over with yet. We have 3 more days in fall camp. So I feel like, we're probably in a good spot with our special teams. And that's another spot that we haven't talked a whole lot about. But I think that, that's huge, obviously, for us. We already know if you go back over the history of really any college football team that had a whole bunch of success, the special teams played a big role, whether it's in just being able to make your PATs or being able to make some critical field goals. So that's a spot that, again, we don't talk a whole lot about, but it's going to be very, very critical if this team wants to go on to make it to the playoffs and to potentially win a national title, which is this team's goal from top to bottom. It's damn sure my goal, okay? I know some of y'all haven't fully bought into that, but that's where I'm at with it. I'm looking at how can we win a national title. I think we've got the talent, but that's one room that we haven't heard a whole lot about. We know that Jackson Ross is a stud as a punter. I think that he's the best in the entire country. How does our kicking game look, though? That's going to be a really, really big one. And we probably won't know for sure until that UT Chat game. I want to see us maybe force ourselves into some situations where they've got to kick some 40-plus yard field goals from different sides just because we got to get in those reps. So moving on to the next point, Coach Heupel also said that we will be playing multiple guys, and he's not just talking about one specific position. I think that goes across the board. Now, the offensive line, I mean, you could probably even say the exact same thing there, but that would be the one spot that I would say you probably won't be playing as many bodies, but we trust the depth that we have. And at some point, because it's such a long season, someone's going to have to sit out for, series or for a few plays or for a game, whatever, whether it's versus Kent State, UT Chet, UTEP, whoever it's versus, some people are going to have to sit out, especially up front, because they're going to take such a beating on every single play. So I feel very confident just in knowing that we do have that depth. That's something else that Coach Heupel kind of spoke on. Said, man, I really like this offensive line. He likes how they're trending. Now, of course, he's going to say that we have to continue to get better. And that kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier in this video. We know that we have to get better. But at the same time, going up against our defensive front versus, I would say, 95% of other fronts that we'll see in this country, I mean, we are so much more prepared than most offensive lines, right? Just because we go up against the best of the best in waves every single day. There's no one on that offensive line from the, seventh year players like John Campbell, who did not participate in today's scrimmage, as far as I know, all the way down to the true freshmen like a Jesse Perry and guys like that, right? Like they're seeing the same amount of talent play in and play out. So I think that we will be ready from that perspective. Now let's move on to Deshaun Bishop. Sounds like he was very steady. Coach Heupel spoke about him. Pretty much that's what he said. He said there's not a whole lot of takeaways that I could say that differs from the first scrimmage to this scrimmage. He just is who he is. Like we trust him. He's going to run hard. He's going to take care of that football. One of the things that I did take away, though, is that Deshaun Bishop is doing a really good job in pass protection. That's going to be huge, obviously, because we've got to protect Nico or whoever the quarterback ends up being in different situations. We've got to get better at that than we were last season. It does sound like that's been a very strong point of emphasis for our entire staff and that entire room. So that was encouraging for me to hear from Coach Heupel. And then he also goes on to talk about the skill players because someone asked him that. I don't think the Coach Heupel liked that guy kind of specified like this. Who are the names of skill players that you think performed well today? But he did go on ahead and name some, and he did talk about Deshaun Bishop. He talked about Peyton Lewis, Dante Thornton, Squirrel White, and he said that the tight end room as a whole performed at a really, really high level. And that's another room that we know for sure that we will be rotating bodies at. No idea who the starter is going to be at this point, but we trust 3, I would even say 4 guys. Like we really do trust them. And we've never had that much depth at that position. So you got to feel great about that. I think that we are deep across the board at several positions, but that's one that matters a lot in this offense just because, that tight end does so much for us. And I think that we'll see more gadget plays. I think that we'll see more 2 tight end sets and, hopefully in goal line situations, we can see some 3 tight end sets. I've said several times, I feel like that could be very deadly because we got 3 guys out there that we know can block, but they can also go out for passes. So what do you do, right? So I think that that's something that we should be very, very encouraged about. Now, Coach Heupel also, just kind of going back to the offensive line, he did kind of speak about, just like that D line and, like where they're at. And I think that it was Rob Lewis who had asked the question, are you kind of judging that D line and the O line on a curve because that D line is so deep? And Coach Heupel said, look, you're not grading people on a curve inside of this league. Like you can't do that. But some of the things that he said, and I can't think specifically exactly what he said, but I know that I've, kind of came away from that little clip right there thinking, well, there's some things on the offensive line that we have to get fixed, right? So that's kind of why I said maybe he was a little bit down in the press conference. I don't think that there's any major cause for concern because I think, again, that offensive line going up against the D-line like they have to go up against every single day, they're going to not look as good in practice as they will in the games. And that's what you want. Like you want to have the practice to be a lot harder than the game. So I think we're going to be fine on the offensive line. It could be some other things that we don't really know about, like we kind of talked about with Lance Hurdy. Sounds like he wasn't in great shape. Maybe that could be part of it as well. It could be some very, very small things. But Coach Heupel did say, again, that he trusts that offensive line. All right, now moving on to the star position, right? So, Coach Heupel talked about Boo being a playmaker. He said that he's very physical, that he plays hard. But I kind of took away that he has to continue to learn and grow inside of our scheme and understand what to do on a play in and play out basis. Now, we did a whole video just kind of talking about that star position, how difficult it actually is to play. Probably the most difficult position on defense to play, I would, say on most defenses, especially inside of ours. You're going to put a whole lot on those guys. Now, you can dumb it down significantly if you want to, and if you feel like you have to, but it's probably going to be Boo and Christian Harrison fighting to see who can figure it out the most and who, is going to be able to make the most plays, who's going to be the most consistent all the way up until, until like that NC State week, you know what I'm saying? I think that kind of leading up into that week, the staff will have a really good idea of who they feel like the starter will be heading into the bulk of the season, like heading into the real games, because UT Chat, there's still going to be a few positions that we are trying to figure out, okay, who starts here, who's 2, who's 3. So there will be a little bit more left to prove, but I was very encouraged just in hearing Coach Heupel talking about Boo Carter. Sounds like he likes his game a whole lot. That's a great thing for us moving forward. Now let's move on to the next thing. Going back to Nico, it sounds like he had really good command of the offense, and obviously that's not going to be coming from today because he did not participate, but sounds like Coach Heupel trusts him, and he trusts the way that he's leading this team. We've heard that from several different people just kind of talking about how we've looked throughout fall camp, really going all the way back to spring. Sounds like Nico is that dude. Definitely trust him for sure. And the final thing that I have right here with the news and notes from Coach Heupel is that we just have to continue to grow and get better. Of course, all coaches will say that just because you're never satisfied. You don't ever want to get complacent because once you do that, that's when you start to go backwards. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. We've got to get better every single day. But I would say, from top to bottom, I really, really like this team. Now, just as far as the questions that I have with this team, number one for me is going to be, how does the offensive line really look? Okay, we talked a lot about them today, but our offensive line is going to be such a critical part of how far do we go, not just in pass protection and keeping Nico upright, because I think that he can and will make plays if he has to, or, when he has to. But how do we look as far as run blocking? Because if our offensive line does a really good job of, getting up to the second level, maybe even sometimes third level and kind of moving bodies or walling guys off, just creating those lanes for our running backs to run through, then we're going to do a really, really good job of running that football. And Coach Heupel's teams have always done a great job of running the ball. I just think that with our scheme and all that type of stuff, that's the way that things are going to go. So I do trust that room as far as the running backs go, but I want to see our offensive line be able to do that versus the teams like UGA. If we can move bodies, on Georgia's defensive line, then we'll beat them. And if we can do that versus Georgia, then we can do it probably versus anybody else. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm looking at. Like, we're always looking at, how can we get better to the point of winning national titles? So that's going to be my biggest question. Obviously, who's going to be the starter at left guard? Is it Andre Carrick? Is it Jackson Lampley? Or is it Shem Umarov? The great news is that's 3 bodies that I really, really like. Also, who's going to be the backup center? The insiders are saying it's probably going to be Dane Davis if it's week 1, but we need for someone to step up there as well, because let's just say, God forbid, if we have multiple guys down from our starting offensive line, Dane Davis can only play in one spot at a time. So we need for some more people to step up. Now, we have heard some really good things, and I've seen some great things from Larry Johnson. I think that he could step up at one of the tackles, whether it's left or right tackle. I actually like him more on the blind side on that left side, and I like Dane Davis more on the right side. But, what do guys like, Trevor Duncan, Jesse Perry, Bennett Warren, those types of guys, what do they give to you? You know what I'm saying? Gage Ginther, Aiden Bustle. There's so many different names. I think that we're deep. We've got some players that we trust. I would say more than we did last season, but how much do we trust them? Do we trust them enough that, we feel confident that we can still win a game if they have to play for 60 minutes of rock'em sock'em? So that's my first question, is with the offensive line. The second one obviously is going to be with the secondary, specifically at that star position. Is it going to be Boo Carter, or is it going to be Christian Harrison? Is it going to be somebody else, right? Because we've identified several players that could play at that position, I feel like, at a pretty high level. But who's going to be the guy, for the bulk of the season, for the SEC portion of this season? We got to get that figured out, and we've got to trust them. But I do feel like, again, we've got enough bodies, that it's not a huge deal to figure out who's going to play there. I do think that we'll kind of rotate back and forth. We're not going to necessarily just play one person, for, I would say, like 90% of the snaps. I think it's going to be a lot closer to probably 60-40, maybe 70-30, whatever it ends up being. Someone will get more of those reps and snaps, but we will continue to rotate there. Now, obviously, safety is going to be another one. Andre Turrentine feels like he's going to be one of the starters. Who's the other one? Is it going to be Will Brooks? Right now, everything's kind of pointing towards that, but it could also be guys like Kobe Thomas. It could be Christian Charles. It could be John Slaughter. So that's another room that we have more options than I feel like people think. And, some of the insiders are saying that someone that just has to kind of separate, right? So hopefully in today's scrimmage, someone did separate and they can just kind of run home with that job. I would love for it to be Kobe Thomas, because he's a veteran, plays with a whole lot of passion. And I think that he's, just got the body type, the skill set, everything that we would want at that position. Obviously, those two corners is going to be Jamal McCoy, Ricky Gibson. Where's Ricky Gibson at with that sore hamstring? Is he going to be ready to rock and roll? Hopefully he is. If not by week 1, then for sure by week 2. And then my third question is going to be about that running back rotation. Dylan Sampson, how much does he play in week 1? Doesn't matter if he doesn't play that much. We need to figure out who's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5. Number one, I think that we will rotate more players than we have before, because the season is so long that you probably want to put in more bodies out there just to kind of take off some of that load from Dylan Sampson, especially. And I've heard some good things about him. He's kind of gaining that weight, being better in pass protection, like not losing a step, something that Coach Sims said. But is it going to be Deshaun Bishop or Peyton Lewis for week 1 as the starter? I think it's probably going to be Deshaun Bishop. Then you'll, more than likely see Peyton Lewis. And then I guess it'll end up being, Keith. So when is Cam Seldon come back? I would say by week 2, he should be ready to rock and roll. But overall, y'all would say that it's been a pretty, I would say not a pretty productive. I would say it's been a very productive fall camp. But we'll see what happens as more insider news and notes kind of roll out throughout the rest of the day. I just want to get this out there to y'all real quick, give y'all my thoughts on how I feel like things went based off of, what I've seen and heard. But please let me know y'all's as well down in the comments section. As always, thank you for sticking all the way to the end, and make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. We'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.